The deep sea is a world of extremes. Far below the sunlit waves, beyond the reach of storms and tides, lies a realm of almost perfect darkness. Pressure builds until it would crush steel. The water is near freezing. Food is scarce. And yet, somehow, life not only persists here, it thrives. In earlier explorations, we've seen how deep-sea animals cling to the most unlikely sources of energy. Clouds of chemicals rising from hydrothermal vents, or the slow decaying bodies of whales that fall from above. We've watched entire communities grow around these islands of opportunity in an otherwise empty sea. But tonight, we're going deeper than all of them. Out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the seafloor suddenly drops away into a vast crescent-shaped wound. Here, the Earth's crust bends and folds in on itself, and the ocean sinks into a chasm so deep that for a long time we weren't sure anything could survive at the bottom. This is the hidden world of the Mariana Trench, running for more than 2,500 kilometers and just under 70 kilometers wide. The trench marks the boundary where one slab of the Earth's crust is being forced down beneath another. The heavy Pacific plate dives under the smaller Mariana plate, dragging seafloor down into the mantle. As it does, molten rock rises elsewhere to feed a chain of volcanic islands. At the deepest point of this fracture lies Challenger Deep, more than 11,000 meters below the surface. If you could place Mount Everest upside down in this pit, its summit would still be buried underwater. This depth belongs to a region of the ocean called the hadal zone, named after Hades, the underworld of Greek myth. It is an appropriate name. Below 6,000 meters, sunlight never arrives. Temperatures hover just above freezing. The weight of the water above presses down with more than 1,000 times the pressure you feel at sea level. Every square centimeter of any surface is squeezed by forces that, for most life, would be instantly lethal. For centuries, people assumed these depths were truly dead, a silent grave at the bottom of the world. Even when we began sounding the oceans with primitive tools, the trench remained an abstract number on a chart, an impossible frontier. That changed in the year 1875, sailing across the Pacific on a pioneering scientific voyage. The crew of the HMS Challenger lowered a weighted line over the side of their vessel. They kept lowering it, and realized, with growing surprise, that they needed more rope than they had ever used before. Somewhere beneath them, the seafloor fell away into a depth no one had measured. It would take another 85 years for anyone to dream of visiting that place in person. In 1960, a strange vessel bobbed in the Pacific swell above Challenger Deep. It was called the Trieste, a bathyscaphe, part submarine, part deep-sea balloon. Inside a cramped steel sphere at the bottom of the craft, two men prepared to do something that had never been done before. Swiss oceanographer Jacques Picard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh sealed themselves inside the pressure sphere. Above them, a vast tank of gasoline provided buoyancy. Below them, nothing but 11 kilometers of cold, black water. The descent took almost 5 hours. As the Trieste sank, the blue light of the surface faded to twilight, then to total darkness. Outside, the temperature dropped and the pressure climbed higher and higher. At 9,000 meters, a loud crack startled the crew. The outer viewing window had fractured under the immense stress. They continued anyway, knowing that a single structural failure could mean instant death. At last, the descent slowed, and the bathyscaphe settled onto the seafloor in a cloud of silt. For the first time in history, human eyes were staring out at the bottom of the deepest known place on Earth. What they saw astonished them. The seafloor was coated in a dark brown fine mud, a diatomaceous ooze formed from the remains of countless microscopic organisms that had drifted down from the surface. And moving across that mud were pale, shrimp-like animals, and something that looked like a flatfish. If complex life could exist even here, at almost 11 kilometers down, then the old idea of a lifeless deep ocean was wrong. In his account of the voyage, Picard wrote that in a single instant, All the questions biologists had been asking for decades were answered. Life could endure the greatest depths of the sea. For 50 years, no human would return to Challenger Deep. But while people stayed away, our machines did not. In 2012, director and explorer James Cameron piloted a new submersible, the Deepsea Challenger, down into the trench. Built to operate vertically like a green spear sinking through the water column, it made a rapid solo plunge into the abyss. When it reached the bottom, lights revealed something beyond the Trieste's brief glimpse. Sprawling, pale microbial mats clinging to altered rocks, forming bizarre filamentous clumps. These mats are formed by bacteria that don't rely on sunlight at all. Instead, they use chemicals leaching out of the rocks as their energy source. In the deep sea, where photosynthesis is impossible, this process, chemosynthesis, takes its place. From these microscopic pioneers, entire ecosystems can be built. 2 decades earlier, in the 1990s, a Japanese unmanned submersible named Kaiko had also ventured into Challenger Deep. In 1996, it set a record for the deepest dive performed by a remotely operated vehicle, sampling the same kinds of microbial mats the Trieste crew had reported. The bacteria that Kaiko collected were remarkable in their own right. Many of them were obligate barophiles, organisms that not only tolerate high pressure, but require it to function properly. Enzymes in their cells are shaped to work under crushing forces that would unravel most life's delicate biochemistry, bring them too close to the surface, and they begin to fail. 2 years later, in 1998, Kaiko returned to the trench, searching for more clues. This time, it stumbled on something even stranger. In the beam of its lights, the cameras captured a large amphipod, a kind of crustacean like a shrimp, but significantly bigger. It was later named Hirandelia gigas. This animal posed a puzzle. At ordinary deep-sea depths, amphipods and many other creatures rely on calcium carbonate to build their shells. But at hadal depths, the combination of pressure and chemistry causes calcium carbonate to dissolve more easily into seawater. Past a certain depth, the shells should weaken and fail. In theory, amphipods shouldn't survive much below about 5,000 meters. Yet here was one thriving at almost 11,000. The solution turned out to be armor. By analyzing its exoskeleton, scientists discovered that Hirandelia gigas coats its shell in a thin layer of aluminum extracted from the muddy seafloor using special chemicals in its gut. This natural metal shield protects the underlying structure from dissolving. As it crawls across the ooze, the amphipod is constantly rebuilding its own armor from the very mud it feeds in. These animals are more than curiosities. As detritivores, they function as the cleanup crew of the hadal zone, shredding whatever organic material reaches the bottom. They can even digest wood, breaking down a resource that most deep-sea creatures would ignore. But amphipods are not alone here. Across the trench floor lie armies of holothurians, sea cucumbers, slowly plowing through the sediment. Some of them are relatives of a particularly odd form, the sea pig. With their stubby, translucent legs and ring of feeding tentacles, sea pigs sift the mud for particles of food, leaving behind faint trails like footprints on a soft, alien plain. Higher up the slope, at around 8,000 meters, lives another record holder, the Mariana snailfish. Soft-bodied, pale, and gelatinous, it looks fragile, yet its body is perfectly tuned to survive at pressures that would pulverize bones. The snailfish lacks the gas-filled spaces that would implode at depth, relying instead on flexible cartilage and specialized molecules in its tissues to help its cells withstand compression. For a long time, this fish marked the lower limit of where vertebrates were thought to survive. Below it, the crushing pressure seems to erase any creature that relies on a rigid skeleton. At Challenger Deep, the only animals we've seen so far appear to be invertebrates. The amphipods, the worms, the sea cucumbers, and others, even stranger, Scattered across the sediment are organisms called xenophyophores, giant single cells that can reach 20 centimeters across. They gather sand grains and particles of detritus to build intricate branching shells, like fragile sedimentary sculptures. Inside each one, a single cell stretches through many chambers, managing all of its business across a body larger than some multicellular animals. Attached to canyon walls, predatory sea squirts, tunicates, wait with their funnel-like mouths open. When something small and unsuspecting drifts by, they snap shut, sucking their prey into a simple but efficient digestive sac. Higher in the water column, in the perpetual midnight of the mesopelagic zone, deep-sea hatchetfish patrol the darkness. Their bodies are thin and metallic, shaped like blades. Along their bellies, rows of tiny light organs, photophores, shine upward. By carefully matching the brightness and color of the dim light filtering down from above, they erase their own shadows, making themselves nearly invisible to anything looking up from below. Together, these creatures form a community woven from pressure, darkness, and scarcity. Each one has evolved a different answer to the same question: how do you survive on the floor of the world? But the trench is more than just a gallery of strange life. It may also hold clues to our own future. The enzymes that let hadal bacteria and animals function under extreme pressure could inspire new tools in biotechnology. Molecules that remain stable when squeezed, bent, and chilled might help us design more robust drugs or new ways to process materials on the surface. Microbes that metabolize unusual chemicals could lead to advances in medicine, industry, and environmental cleanup. Even now, samples brought up from Challenger Deep and other trenches are being studied in laboratories around the world. Inside innocuous vials of mud and water, entire universes of microscopic adaptations are waiting to be understood. And yet, while we're just beginning to appreciate this world, traces of our impact have already arrived. In recent dives, explorers have found sheets of plastic and other debris resting on the trench floor, bags and wrappers carried by currents and gravity into the deepest, most remote places on Earth, where they will persist for decades or centuries. Around them, amphipods and sea cucumbers go about their business, unable to distinguish our waste from the rest of the environment. The deepest places on the planet are no longer beyond our reach. They're now within our shadow. Deep-sea mining proposals threaten to disturb abyssal plains and perhaps trenches in the pursuit of metals and minerals. Heavy machines will plow through sediments that have lain undisturbed for millions of years, releasing plumes that drift for hundreds of kilometers, smothering habitats we barely understand. Many of the species living here have life cycles tuned to slow, stable conditions. It is not yet clear how they would respond to sudden large-scale disruption. At the same time, a new generation of instruments is opening the trenches to continuous observation. Pressure-resistant landers can sit on the seafloor for months, watching as particles drift down, as animals feed, as subtle currents reshape the ooze. Swarms of small autonomous vehicles may one day map entire trenches in 3 dimensions, recording temperature, chemistry, and sound. If we use these tools wisely, we may learn enough about the hadal zone to protect it, even as we explore it. Before we end, we need to talk briefly about something closer to home: your own journeys into the digital depths. This part of the video is sponsored by NordVPN. If you spend a lot of time online, your data is constantly moving through networks you can't see. On public Wi-Fi or when you're traveling, that data can be exposed in ways you might not realize. A virtual private network, or VPN, works a bit like the bioluminescent cloak of a deep-sea creature. It wraps your traffic in an encrypted tunnel, hiding it from prying eyes as it moves from your device to the wider internet. With NordVPN, you can connect with a single click and route your data through thousands of servers in dozens of countries around the world. That lets you browse more privately, secure your connection on unsecured networks, and access content that might not be available where you live. all without changing your everyday habits. You can protect multiple devices at once, your laptop, your phone, maybe even your tablet, so that whether you're at home, in a cafe, or traveling abroad, your connection is shielded behind the same secure tunnel. If you'd like to try it out, you can head to the link in the description and use our code for a special offer on a 2-year plan plus an extra bonus. Thanks again to NordVPN for supporting this deep dive. Back in the real ocean, far below the noise of our networks, the Mariana Trench remains almost entirely in shadow. We've sent a handful of humans and a few more machines into its depths. We've filmed sea pigs marching across the mud, watched amphipods strip carcass clean, traced the outlines of single-celled giants, and glimpsed fish living at the very edge of what a spine can endure. But all of that is just a narrow strip of sea floor, on one side of one trench, in one ocean, on a water-covered planet. There are likely hundreds of species down there that we haven't seen yet, each with its own improbable solution to the problem of existence. Creatures that could change the way we think about life's limits. Microbes that might teach us new chemistry. Animals whose lineages stretch back into the deep past, surviving mass extinctions and climate shifts we only know from rocks. If we disturb these habitats before we understand them, we'll lose not just the organisms themselves, but the stories they tell about how life can be. For now, though, the hadal zone remains a place of quiet. In the beam of a submersible's lights, amphipods continue to crawl, bacterial mats continue to flicker on unseen rocks, and single cells continue to weave their sediment houses grain by grain. Above them, the water column rises for 11 kilometers, through darkness, through twilight, through the surface, and on into the storms and sunlight that most of us call the real world. Standing on a cliff, looking out over the Pacific, the surface seems flat and empty, but directly below your feet, the planet's crust curves away and plunges down into a realm of crushing pressure and almost endless night, a world as alien as anything we imagine in outer space, yet connected to us by every drop of water. We have only just begun to dip our toes into that world. The hidden life of the Mariana Trench challenges our assumptions about where life can exist and what forms it can take. It reminds us that even in the most hostile environments on Earth, evolution finds a way. And it raises a simple question that will drive exploration for decades to come. If life can adapt to the very bottom of the deepest trench on our own planet, what else might be possible in oceans we have yet to see? On worlds we have yet to visit. Until we find out, the hadal zone will continue to wait in silence at the edge of what we know and the beginning of what we don't.